Hi, welcome to Lullaby Needle Felting 101. I'm Laura. I'm going to talk about the basics of needle felting, the tools you'll need to get started, wool, and what you can do with needle felting. I love to needle felt. I do it a lot. I've been doing it for around 9-10 years, and it's really easy. It's time consuming, but you can make great detailed things from your needle felting. First thing to get started, you need a sponge. That is your work surface. You can buy different kinds of sponges, but I prefer to get my sponge from an upholstery shop because you can get them in different sizes, really large for big pieces and really thick. Then we have the all-important felting needle. Now, it's a good idea to mark your needles with fingernail polish and then make yourself a chart telling you what color is which needle, and then you'll always know what you're grabbing when you're felting. Each one has a special purpose. There's fine, coarse, reverse, and medium. These are the basic needles. Fine is for fine detail. It's for smoothing out areas. Coarse and heavy is for moving large pieces of wool, for attaching pieces. The reverse pulls out wool. That's a special effect that we'll talk about later. And then there's the medium, which is the all-purpose needle that I use the most. When you're using the needles, it helps if you have a handle. This handle holds 4 needles. This handle, 8 needles. And this handle, which looks like a weapon, has 20 needles. These handles with lots of needles are for working on large expanses. Maybe for flat felting, a bag or a map or a big leaf, you would want to use a handle with a lot of needles. The handles that have fewer needles, like 3, this is for detail work. So if you want to make indentations in a toy or a puppet for a face, especially if you're making eyes, if you want to indent this area, this is the type of needle that you would do it. And I would probably put the medium needle inside these handles. The second most important thing that you need in needle felting is the wool. Now, there are lots of different types of wool, and I recommend the coarse wool. The coarse wool, such as this Shetland, felts very fast and very firm. There's fine wool, which is best for wet felting. That's the ancient art of felting that is not related to needle felting. Coarse wool is Shetland, Corringdale, Bergschaft, to name a few. The wool comes in different colors. This is a piece of roving, which is like a string of wool. And this is a bat, which is like in quilt batting. It's like a blanket of wool. The difference is this bat is fluffy and it doesn't felt as quickly or as nicely actually as the Shetland. But both of these I use all the time. These are the coarse wools that are best for needle felting. Now, there are several techniques, basic techniques for needle felting. The first one, I call it a 3D technique. And needle felting is basically about putting shapes together. You felt or even sew the shape together, and as you add the shapes, you're sculpting like in clay. Needle felting is additive and subtractive. It's very forgiving. If you make a mistake, you start all over. You can cut out your mistakes. Also, you should never actually cut the wool. You should always pull the wool apart like this, unless we're working on a special effect, which I'll show you later. So, wool, you can save yourself a little bit of money if you use fiber fill as the base of your shapes. So this is stuffing, like you stuff a pillow or a doll with. And some of the basic shapes of course, or it would be a circle or an oval. So I take sewing thread and I bind the stuffing into the shape that I want it to be, like this. Okay, so I'm going to start with a circle. Now, if you want an example, this pear is made from a circle with a triangular shape attached to the top. And the most simple of shapes, the circle, you see, it's only a circle with a flat felted leaf on top. So that's an example of how we're going to start. Okay, so once you have your basic shape, you take the wool, cover your shape, and then start felting. Now, the little cuts on the needles, they mesh the scales on the wool together, and that's what makes it bind together. Okay, so when your shape is completely felted, it will look something like this. The longer you felt, the harder your piece will be. Also, the smoother your piece will be. So I like my pieces to be really hard and smooth instead of fluffy. So it takes a lot of felting. There is a tip that you can do. I call it washing your pieces. You can wet them in warm to hot water, squeeze out all the water and put them in a dryer. And when they're tumbling in the dryer actually felts your piece. So if you're making a lot of toys, if you're doing a class and you need a lot of pieces, then doing this washing technique saves you a lot of time. So this is our basic shape, and you use scissors a lot in felting. You can cut your shapes. Like this. Okay, now you can see the stuffing on the inside, and I want to make a mushroom. So I take out the stuffing, which is in here really good. When you take out stuffing, you can't take out every bit of stuffing. You need to leave some attached to the wool. You need to leave half an inch, quarter of an inch left sticking onto the wool to give it substance. Otherwise it will be floppy. Okay, so here is the mushroom cap. So I start by felting some white onto the underside of the cap. And it'll take a few minutes to felt it so that it's not fluffy anymore. When you're finished felting, this is the cap. And then you'll want to make a stem from the stuffing in a shape something like this, and you'll cover it with white wool, and you'll felt it on all over the shape. And when the stem is completely felted, it will look something like this. Now, I like to take a needle and thread and sew some pieces together to make them more sturdy, especially if it's a toy for a child. You don't want him to be able to rip it apart. So just a needle and thread to sew this together. And then you can add your little spots, which is just a pinch of wool like this. And you cover the cap with your little wool spots. And then your mushrooms end up looking like this. You can also take white wool and cover where they are attached and then felt here. That will strengthen the mushroom and make it look nicer so that you can't see the seam. So you can make lots of different mushrooms, and basically you started with an oval for the stem and a circle for the cap. You cut the circle in half, and it's just an example of how you put together simple shapes to make toys and puppets and dolls and whatever you want with the needle felting. Now that was a 3D felting. There's also a felting technique that I call flat felting. Now what is flat felting? Why do you need to flat felt? Well, in this doll, for example, these leaves, he's a sunflower doll. These leaves and his leaf hands are flat felted instead of 3D felted. So what you do is you take however much wool you need, you take your needle, you felt it flat like this. And then the key to this is not to felt too long before turning it over, because it will felt to the sponge, and then when you pull it up and turn it over, it will tear it apart. So you're going to flip it over many times. And again, to speed up the process, you can put this, wet it and put it in the dryer, and you can let the dryer felt it for you, and it will come out very sturdy, strong, and smooth. Okay, so this is a flat felted circle, and again it's good for leaves, for if you're trying to make clothes for a doll. You can actually make a little piece of fabric, cut out pieces. There are a lot of different uses for flat felting. And then the third technique is called, I call it rope felting. So I take a piece of wool and I roll it like this. And you could also roll a piece of stuffing and bind it with the thread and then cover it with the wool if you prefer, but just here. Okay, turn it over. Turn it. Keep turning the rope as you felt. And uses for a shape like this would be stem for a flower, or in this case, this doll has rope felted arms, legs, even a body. Okay, so you felt your rope till it's very firm, and then you can take it and you can roll it between your hands like this, and this helps to smooth it out quite a bit, like that. So the three techniques are 3D felting, flat felting, and rope felting. If you know how to do these three techniques, you can make all the shapes that you need. And then the art of it is putting them together to make your sculpture, your felted sculpture. Some other things I can show you. You can make puppets from the felting. This is a long oval There's a circle at the end. These are circles that were attached for eyes. This piece was flat felted. I made a long piece of fabric and I attached it to the head. These are Fimo teeth, where I just cut holes in his jaw and glued in the Fimo teeth that I made. And these are glass eyes that I stuck in there. So that's something you can do. These puppets have sewn bodies, but the heads are needle felted. These are very simple projects to do. The head is a circle, the nose is a circle, you do some sculpture on the face, you felt, this is yarn, fuzzy yarn for the hair, glass eyes, a very small piece of red wool that I've twisted in my fingers to make very fine, felted on his face. I would have used a fine needle to felt this mouth. I would have used a heavy needle to felt the indentations around the nose and the eyes. And that's Hansel. This is Gretel. This is just coarse yellow wool braided. Again, circle for the head, circle for the nose, a little bit of indentation around there. And you've got some more puppets. Okay, on to more sophisticated felting. This shape was a square. I felted a square, and then I used my scissors to cut out the inside of the square to give me this sort of shape. These are two cylinders. This was a square, a three-dimensional square. All took a long time to felt it to look exactly the way I wanted it, but felted that into a chair. And then here's the dog, and the dog is made up of many different shapes, felted together, covering the seams so that you can't see where they're felted together. One more way to make a shape is with a mold. Now, a lot of people take cookie cutters, and to make applique shapes, they'll fill a cookie cutter. But this is a different type of mold. I'm going to make a nest, so the shape I want is based on a circle. So with my stuffing, I'm binding it with the sewing thread. I'm binding it to a sphere. And this is going to be my mold. Okay, so the nest will cover 3/4 of the mold. So you felt it over 3/4 of this circle. Now, again, like with the sponge and flat felting, you don't want to felt too often in one spot because your wool will get stuck to the mold, and then when you pull it off, it will tear it apart. So you have to felt generally your shape and then pull it off. If I keep felting like this, I'm felting the wool to the mold, and I don't want that. So when you felt down like this, you're making something smaller. But if you just want to smooth the surface, I just want to felt the wool, I don't want it felted into the mold, use your needles and felt sideways, like this. Skim the surface of the nest, so you're really not touching the mold. You're only felting the wool, the nest. And you're not making it smaller, but you're making it smoother when you do this. Sometimes you want something to be smooth but not necessarily smaller, so skim the wool with the needles, like this. Okay, now you're going to have to pull off your shape, pull it off the mold. And if you've put enough wool on there and it's thick enough, it should retain the basic shape of the mold. So now you continue to felt it in the shape that you want. And you hold it up to the light. If you can see through the piece, if you can see light in there, then you need to add more wool. You can add it to the inside. if you feel more comfortable, you can put it back on the mold and continue to felt like this. Okay, don't forget, you've got to pull it off of the mold. You can also continue to felt it like this, but pull it apart often so it doesn't stick together. Okay, so now we have our nest. I could keep felting this for another 15 minutes if I wanted it to be stronger and sturdier, but for now you can see how we got this shape. Using a mold is good for quite a few different subjects. For example, you can make hats, like real hats. I make hats for costumes. I make the mold as big as a head, and this is the basic shape of a lot of hats. It can also be used as a basic shape for a mask. This is a nest. There are a lot of different things that you can do with the mold. This doll is a culmination of a lot of different techniques. One of the things about her that I wanted to show you was her dress. Before I sewed the dress, the pattern on the front is needle felted. So you can needle felt into clothes. Best would be needle felting into felt or wool, like a wool sweater. And you can felt great designs like this. This doll is not a beginner project, but she can illustrate to you what can be done with needle felting, and I can show you some of the techniques that you've just learned that you would use on a project like this. So her hair is Shetland wool that I braided, and then I lightly felted it so that it's not flyaway and that it stays nice, because if you don't felt the wool, it's possible that it can come off. She is made of quite a few shapes. Her legs, for example, were started as long cylinders. Her knees are circles. Her calves had very shallow, small ovals applied to them. Her arms, you see, are long rope shapes like we learned. Her head is a sphere. Her nose is another sphere. The indentations where her eyes are, I used a heavy needle for that. I cut holes to place these doll eyes in, and then I felted around the eyes. I made indentations where her lips would be. She has a little teddy bear here, and he's made up also of rope shapes for the arms and legs and spheres for the head. So this is one of the dolls that you can eventually make by needle felting. Okay, always remember that your needles are sharp, so try to keep your fingers away and watch what your hands are doing at all times, and children should always be supervised. And when you're felting, if you have small pieces that are attached, for example, wings to an owl or nose to a gnome doll, you should sew those pieces on or delete the pieces altogether. Don't give a small child a felted piece that they could potentially pull off the small pieces and they could become choking hazards. So now you have all of the techniques that you need to make all the basic shapes, to make all the toys and puppets and bags and hats and costumes and needle felted toys that you want to make.